remember very, very vividly my first real brush with actual authority. Um, it was my father, obviously, in my childhood. And he was, as a human being, just an automatic source of authority, it seems. Like, that's who he was. He couldn't help it. He just radiated authority. And it was what I can only call really the best example that I know of good authority. And by that I mean it was both authority, yet obviously good at the same time. There was no discernible darkness. He clearly wasn't somebody that wanted to be a figure of authority. He didn't seek it. He didn't lord it, you know. He wasn't trying to take something from you or necessarily occupy a position of superiority. It's just who he was. And he was and still is a man of few words, but when he spoke, you would listen. And my mother was and still is the life force, you know. And he was authority. And now we're peers, you know. The relationship changes over time. He's still the same man, but now it's different, you know. We're more like peers. But I remember when we were kids, I would share a room with my two brothers, and we would, you know, beyond our bedtime, be in there screwing around. And all of a sudden, the hall light would flick on. That would be my dad coming in to, you know, make sure we were sleeping. But before he would even get to our room, it was a short distance. But as soon as we saw that light flicker on, we could actually hear it, because you could hear the light, you know, of the actual switch flick on. And we would just be in bed pretending to sleep before he even got there, you know. We would just snap to it. And he wouldn't even have to say anything. He would just have to, you know, look in the room with the image of us obviously not sleeping, but doing our best to pretend. And that's the basic manner of my childhood. Very, very stable. And I remember the exact moment when Christianity, or really all religion for that matter, ceased to be in my development. I must have been 10 or 12. And we were driving to a basketball game, and I looked at my dad and said, Grandma and Grandpa told me that God is my real father. And he was just like, okay, you know. He kind of took that personally. And we used to have these Bible studies with my grandparents, and that just kind of ended. You know, I didn't really put two and two together at that time, or, you know, it was kind of something I realized later. But, yeah, and Christianity, or even the concept of God, or, you know, God the Father, the ultimate authority, didn't come, as I've said, as even a possibility to me until just a few years ago. But to be an authority, it's strange. He didn't have to wear any sort of costume or do anything special to be an authority figure. It was just a general authority, an expansive authority, to where you didn't necessarily have to be an expert to assume that role. And we have things in our society, in our world, that are almost permanent positions, established positions, that are always positions of authority that different human beings occupy over time, like judges or people we elect into office, or even police officers. But those all sort of come with a costume. You know, there's the robes, the suit, the role, the uniform. And when you put that on, your authority becomes apparent. And that's a very specific type of authority. And even with that, I still have a healthy bit of skepticism. Because when I was a kid, I was coached by a lot of older men in basketball. I was around a lot of older people. And I always kind of, I don't want to say had trouble with them, but I just didn't really accept them as a authority figure. I had to learn how to do that because I already had this massive source of authority in my life, which was sort of supreme. So when other people would sort of enter my zone as figures of authority, I would just be very skeptical, almost as if it was redundant. Like I don't really need that. What was my sense? So I had to learn how to be coachable, or to accept somebody as specific types of authority. Not a general authority, but a specific thing, like to be coached how to play basketball. And that takes time. And even now, I was somebody who knew at a young age that I could not join the military. If you knew my personality and you knew me, you would instantly understand that that's not possible. Not because I have a problem with authority. It's because I have a difficulty taking it seriously. I can't unsee just the human being underneath the role. Like if somebody was, barking orders at me, I would not be able to unsee the fact that you are another human who derives his or her authority from this particular area of expertise. Which sounds kind of weird, but I wouldn't be able to help but laugh and say, you're doing good at this. You are playing this very well right now. It's just pretty persuasive. It's convincing. You believe this, don't you? You're committed. Interesting. I wouldn't be able to help but see it as more of a psychological exercise. Because that's the thing that I see in people above all else, is almost their soul, in a way. I can't help but see the thing that we all have in common in people, no matter who they are, no matter what part of society or whatever they fill. I see the thing that we all have in common. But at the same time, I can still respect your specific role, what it took to get you there, what you sacrificed, what you must know in order to be there. I still can completely appreciate that. They're almost two separate things that I have to put together to comprehend you as a person. And there are people who are all sorts of different types of authority on all sorts of different types of things. When I walk into a classroom, I have to assume that you know what you're talking about because you're here as a teacher. You've been through some sort of process that's gotten you where you are. So I automatically have to assume that you are an authority on the subject. But as time goes, you still kind of have to show that. You can't just rest on that assumption. And that goes for any position, no matter how high. The fact that you're there assumes that you've been through something quite serious or real to get there. But in order to stay there and maintain your authority, you still have to, on a daily basis, play that role well, or even exceptionally, if you want any sort of distinguished appreciation. And what you do still has to correspond with the truth. That is the number one thing, probably, in human affairs, especially with authority. Hypothetically, if you say things and you're right 100% of the time, when I come to you, you're just a source of authority now, because you've been right so many times on so many things. I can't help but see you that way. It's sort of automatic. But if you're never right, if you're wrong 100% of the time, you have no authority. It's gone. And you have to earn it by being right in some way at least once. And I'm the sort of person who knows something about everything, who knows a lot about a few things, and knows a whole lot about, let's say, the things that unify those things. Philosophy, let's say. That has some special resonance to me. And I can't help but exercise that. And when I meet you, and I see you, and I talk to you, I can't help but cut through the role and get to the person. I can't stay in, the mundane or small talk for very long, no matter your education, no matter how intelligent you are. There's always going to be the humanity there. And in that, there's always going to be depth. And those roles, those avatars of authority, they have to exist because they're almost like cookie cutter authority avatars in society that are necessary to keep civilization going. The judges and the police officers and even the intellectuals. But the intellectuals especially have to really sustain themselves in corresponding with the truth. Because that's another quick way to just completely lose your authority, is by consistently not corresponding with the truth. And it's easy. It is easy. I mean, to me, the most important parts of the Bible are John's, all of John's, and the Ten Commandments. And it is pretty simple. I mean, thou shalt not bear false witness. It's easy to read that and just kind of be like, yeah, okay, I get it. That makes sense. But the degree to which that statement is valuable in human life is excessive. Like, we have to be corresponding to what is true. We have to be doing our best to represent reality as accurately as possible. And I am impressed by people who do this well, because it's not as easy as it sounds. To have multiple ways to describe one thing that are all still true, that shows that you understand it more than most. If you have multiple ways to describe something that aren't true, it shows that you just simply don't know what you're saying. You don't know what you're talking about. And you're bleeding your own authority. Oh, why would you want to do that? We've sort of fallen into a pitfall in the last 10 or 15 years. I call it sort of like an intellectual dark age, where we think these things are malleable. And I get the seduction of the idea that you are so much the master of your domain in the universe that you can just sort of bend these things and still be just fine or even excel. But you can't, and you won't. You just won't. You're better off corresponding to what is true. Even if you have to take some hits along the way, you're far better off. Like, you even the hits you take add to your authority. If you're dead wrong about something, and that becomes known, and you incorporate that into your observations of the truth, like, taking responsibility for it, and slog on, keep going, that adds to your overall authority as a human being, versus just trying to protect it by lying. That siphons off your authority, it bleeds it off, and you can do that. I mean, you can. That's fine. These are more or less recommendations. And we all know this, but I think some part of us likes the idea that these things are malleable, and trust and authority are very similar things. And when intellectual authority, when legal authority, the authority of the state, when rhetorical authority is gone, all that's left is force. Because force is one of the degrees of authority. But force alone is cause for rebellion. It's the way that draws the most skepticism out of the public. If you only have force, let's say, and you have no intellectual rigor, no legal rigor, no moral rigor for your regime, and all you have is force, you are constantly fighting rebellions. You are constantly fighting against people scheming against you. It will never end until you're gone. Because it's such an affront to rely solely on force. Force is indeed a layer that's required, but it should be such a small part of the whole that it's barely even noticed, that it actually looks like just a necessary function within the larger scheme. You need to have all of these things fleshed out: the intellectual, the legal, the moral, the rhetorical. All of these things need to be robust so that force just fits in as another part. We've seen how this goes. We know exactly what this all looks like. Imagine having a situation where your intellectual heft was so heavy that you didn't need to rely on force really at all. Imagine some situation where that sort of authority was completely unnecessary, and in that sort of hypothetical, you're drifting sort of towards like a utopian ideal where, there's no crime and everybody's happy and everything is great. But what would be required for you and your family or your wife or your loved ones to be able to walk the streets at night, at midnight, anywhere, and feel completely safe? What's required for that to happen? Anywhere in the city, to have not a single part of you that starts looking over your shoulder and feels that kind of feeling that there might be some kind of predator around, or that you're vulnerable, or anything like that. What's required for that to happen? What's required for the opposite to happen? What's required for a situation to come about where it's impossible to walk the streets at night? Well, you either need to have such a heavy-handed approach to force that people feel fear, to where criminals, let's say, actually feel fear. They're afraid to break the law. So the force requirement is always going to be there on some level, but it's mitigated by the intellectual and rhetorical and moral heft, to where a criminal actually feels bad for committing crime. You have to have those two ends pulling on each other. You have to have a hypothetical criminal who, A, is afraid because of force, and B, feels bad about committing crime. Those two things mitigate the possibility of crime being committed in the first place. And then there's other factors, of course. There are the economic factors, but those are more peripheral. You can have a poor economic situation in an area and still have it not be a zone where crime is that bad, because we've seen this in phases. If you want to increase crime, you have to decrease that moral and intellectual quotient in a person, and you have to decrease the possibility that there may be repercussions in terms of force. And if you can do those things, then crime will go up. And it'll be every day. It'll be to where people do not want to leave their houses at night. And if you do that, you are bleeding off the authority of those in charge. Like, people just will not respect you at all. They will not think that you are in concert with the truth. They'll think you're up to something. They'll think you're actually doing it on purpose. Because we know these things. These things are so elemental. They have been tried over and over and over again. We run this experiment through all sorts of different types of societies and civilizations across time, different regions, different locations, different bodies of law, different leaders, different people, and it always goes the same way. And it's a failure to understand human psychology to think some of these things are malleable. The possibility of force has to exist, but you can do that without being, let's say, oppressive. But you also need a hefty, robust sense of morality in the population. And there are things that are low-hanging fruit that I see people pick on. That sort of erodes that general sense of universal moral weight. And that is by splintering people up and dividing them on superficial grounds. If you do that, people will simply stop seeing each other in a way that evokes a moral sense of self-restraint. And that's a problem. That is a problem. And, we happen to live in a place that elects its leaders. We happen to live in a place that, despite what some say, is quite legendary. The United States is quite a thing. I mean, it's just completely record-shattering across the board in as many ways as you can conceive records. And it's kind of despicable to view yourself as unimportant as an elected official, to view yourself in the context of personal gain. Like, what a low bar you set for yourself. And it's like I say all the time, you're just in the way. And over time, this thing that's happening, these people, these sorts of leaders, are becoming increasingly noticeable. I mean, they stick out like sore thumbs, the way they speak. They have no authority in their words. They have nothing of admiration in them when they stand before you and deliver their rhetoric. And I don't mean rhetoric as a derogatory term. I mean rhetoric in a almost magical way of thinking, because that's kind of what words are, a sort of hypnosis. And I just view some people's rhetorical ability as just abysmal. Abysmal. I mean, we live in the age of information. You can become extremely knowledgeable, extremely intelligent for free. It's all available. So when I see public figures who are poor with their rhetorical abilities, it's semi-comical, but mostly disgraceful. You shouldn't be there. You need to be doing something else with your time, because public office isn't for you. If you're running your cities, these legendary cities, these beautiful places, into the ground, you should be doing something else with your time. We don't need you. I mean, just straight up. You're not good at this. You tried, but you need to move on. Because those positions can be better filled by somebody who actually cares. Who actually wants to see these places do well. Every single person do well, no matter where you are, on any kind of quantifiable scale. Every person. And that starts with believing that your region and the people there and the people in charge are acting in concert with the truth. And that's not the case in many places. Quite the opposite. People actually think in many places that you are actively working against the people there. People actually believe that the leadership is actively trying to make these areas worse. That's how bad you are. And, you know, at this time, like I said, there's so much information available. And at the same time, there is so much material wealth. You can borrow massive sums of money. There is so much capital available. You can do just about anything right now. And the idea that a city or a state, but especially a city, can be in the red is catastrophically mismanaged. I mean, at this time in the world, in the United States, the richest place on earth, there is no excuse, no reason why any city should be in the red at all, financially. Everything is available to you. And these amazing places, many of which once sat at the highest strata of stature, are losing their authority. But fortunately, these things ebb and flow. And somebody's going to come along and right the ship. And to anybody paying attention, you know what I'm talking about. The United States is too stable a place for an actual armed rebellion. That's why when people talk about civil war, I don't believe that at all. And plus, we forget about how large the United States is. It's huge. If something pops off regionally, maybe. But the idea of some sort of civil war, it just seems exceptionally unlikely, especially because you have so many people who buy into the project of the United States as is. The idea that you could, take on a legitimate rebellion and turn the United States into something better is extremely unlikely. So, yeah, and the pitch that some people have when they talk about such things is so piss poor intellectually. That's why nobody gets behind it except for those who have to make themselves seem more supported than they actually are. And, yeah. And there are some people that I trust a lot. Some people are great sources of information and the truth and authority. Such people will just naturally gain authority over time and just continue to do so, and their legacy will be cemented firm in the pantheon of people who did well. But that's available. I mean, that's available to most any of us. The only reason I am an authority on anything is because I am, in a way, taking advantage of the way things are today. And that is that there is just so much information available. You'd be a fool to not immerse yourself in it. And I get that sometimes learning is a matter of interest. I mean, not even sometimes, quite often it's a matter of interest, but yeah, I'm mostly referring to people who are in leadership positions because it really is bad, you guys. I listen to you speak, and it's not only unimpressive, it's causes a recoil. You're not the best and our brightest. You simply aren't. And you have to do and say things that correspond with the truth. That's all you have to do. And if you haven't been doing that, you should at least start. Because redemption is one of the most beautiful things that there is. And we need authority. We do. We need people to buy into this stuff. We need people who do like to join the military, who actually get something from that. And my dad was in the military. He was in the Navy. And a lot of who he is as a person has bled off into me. But that's the thing. They talk about high trust societies and low trust societies. In high trust societies, you can approach just about anybody, and just about anybody can approach you, and you can kind of see each other's as a decent moral authority in a way that's unearned. You don't even need to earn it. It's just ascribed to you by your existence in the society. And sometimes we do think that. We think like, you guys must be doing this on purpose, because often evil can cloak itself in stupidity. In fact, it's one of the best cloaks because it's plausible. If I'm playing baseball and I'm a catcher, and there's somebody trying to hit the ball and they hit me in the knee one time, well, that might be an accident. You just hit me in the knee once. But if you do it twice, all right, it could still be an accident, but the likelihood is decreasing. If you hit me 7 times with the bat, then I know you're doing it on purpose. You can only hide under stupidity or ignorance for so long. If you've built an entire career off of time sort of being this buffer between your, I don't want to say evil, but I'm sure it's plenty there, but your misdeeds, then it's like I always say, you're just in the way, and that era needs to come to an end. And we're sort of in this social media era as well, where we are, hypothetically, so connected. And I think us and our leaders are going to become closer, let's say. I mean, it seems like a natural extension of always having access to the same forum and being able to talk. And it's an interesting concept because we give you authority by electing you. And we expect you to act on our behalf. And in return, you're going to get more adoration, and you're going to be more revered than anybody, than more than most people can even imagine. And it really is that easy, as corresponding to what you know to be true in the most sincere way possible. Because there's been things that I've believed that ended up being wrong. But I didn't try to sustain or contort my arguments or the things that I say to uphold that wrong thing. That just, as I say, invites the forces of entropy. It creates this twisted, distorted spot in me. And I'll continue to put that out into the world. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to expand and grow distortions? Why would I want to introduce that into the world, these gray spots, where nothing technically exists yet there is something there? No. I want things to be clear. At least the things that should be clear. And I don't want that because I want authority, but authority naturally comes with that. And like I said earlier, if you're right all the time, you accrue authority, but nobody can be right all the time. But you can certainly get pretty close this day and age, especially people who, I guess, make a living or have as their primary function forecasters. I mean, if somebody was a weather forecaster and they were wrong every time, where does their authority go? And what have they been doing this whole time? How did they get there? Those are the sorts of things that should be asked about people who are in leadership roles more than anything else. because it's infinitely more important, but at the same time it's easier to obscure, because there are some things about our system, as much as I love it, that are still easy to exploit. Like, the fact that we have those who we elect, and we also have those who were before them. I never want to hear that. I never want to hear somebody say XYZ is the way it is because of the person before me. You can do that a little bit. You can put that in play, and we all already comprehend that. We all already know that that's the way it is. But grab it by its balls, dude. Grab it and make it yours. Like in the last administration, the presidential administration, things happened that just completely decimated that dude's presidency. And instead of grabbing these things, the problem wasn't just in the things that unfolded, it was how they were handled afterward too that made it just way worse. So much, it's as if they had a handbook on how to destroy yourself, how to lose authority over time. That's like the title of the book they're reading. First you make a mistake, and then you keep making the same mistake within that mistake, and you keep making it worse. That's what happened over and over again. Like the situation with withdrawing from Afghanistan. As bad as the actual withdrawal itself was, you could have made a simple 5-minute statement that would have cleaned it up as best as humanly possible. Obviously, you can't clean up such an event completely, but you could have punctuated it, sealed it in the past, and moved on. Instead, it's still this open wound. It's like, you people, you don't know what you're doing. That's what it looks like from the outside. I really, that's, I guess, sort of the fault of democracy a little bit, is because of the fact that we choose our own leaders, we ourselves have to be intelligent and informed in all these things. And if we aren't, we'll end up making mistakes. And it's extremely important that we are as good or better than the people we elect.